I'm Erin.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Ben.
I'm Chase.
And this is our presentation on U.S. tariffs on agricultural workers in Massachusetts. Right now in Massachusetts, farmers are having to make tough choices for their farms.
Specifically, Red Fire Farm in Western Mass reported that this year they have put in more effort than any other year, but are still coming out with less of a product, or less profit. Now, most people would assume that this is due to crop failure or bad weather, or even a mix of both, but according to New England Public Media and Red Fire Farm's official website, this is actually due to tariffs.
So what are tariffs? Tariffs are excise taxes intended to make products manufactured abroad less appealing to American consumers due to raised prices.
One type of
And this begs the question, what effects do U.S. tariffs have on agricultural jobs in Massachusetts?
One type of tariff is a retaliatory tariff, and this is pretty much when one country places a tax on another country's products in order to get back at them for placing a tax on its own products. And in the U.S., retaliatory tariffs raise the prices of U.S. Goods for foreign buyers, which then makes the U.S. less competitive compared to alternative or local products. This is a statistic from Congress.gov that states retaliatory tariffs from China and Canada cost the U.S. agricultural sector up to $16.9 billion annually. Overall, retaliatory tariffs force international buyers to choose other suppliers, which then leads to U.S. Farmers making less of an income overall.
And so farmers are having to make the choice of keeping their returning customers or accounting for all the rising prices. The first option is keeping the pricing the same, which would allow the customers to still come in because the prices are the same or less than others who are raising the prices. But overall, this would lead to less profit and inability to buy more resources for their farms. And the other choice is the raising the prices for a similar profit, but this would, as I said, turn away customers. And overall, it could lead to less of a profit because of these customers fleeing to other places to buy their goods.
So what are supply chains? Supply chains are how a product gets from the farm to the customer. This includes how it is produced, how it is stored, and how it is transported. Farms rely on speedy and efficient supply chains. Unfortunately, they are infected by these tariffs as customers change their buying habits, which makes demand unpredictable, and farms rush before tariffs get put in place, which cause congestion within the supply chain. And lastly, shipping companies change their routes, which causes delays in deliveries. Here's a quote from our President Donald Trump, which states, "To great farmers of the United States, get ready to start making a lot of agricultural products to be sold inside the United States. Have fun." This shows the intended result of tariffs, which are protecting domestic industries, which are industries that sell products within the United States.
One of the main reasonings given behind the levying of tariffs is job creation. Do tariffs actually lead to significant job growth? Well, according to IBIS World, the world's largest independent publisher of industry reports, job growth has actually declined in Massachusetts this year. With job growth declining in every county in Massachusetts, it becomes apparent that tariffs are not having positive effects. The other main line of reasoning given behind the levying of tariffs is the idea that domestic industries will be protected. This is another data set from IBIS World that shows, the growth of the agriculture industry in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has seen less than a 1% increase in total industry growth, and according to Derek Bonuet from the University of Texas at Austin, this is most likely because domestic industries that become overly reliant on income from tariffs will become unstable. In total, tariffs are not effective in achieving their primary goals of creating jobs and allowing domestic industries to flourish. While politically attractive, tariffs are economically inefficient.
So the overall intended results of tariffs are to protect domestic industries, raise government revenue through these tariffs, and overall create and save jobs. However, the reality is much different as they increase production costs because of the tax on the materials that farms need. They decrease in revenue due to the retaliatory tariffs, and these two factors lead to job losses and unstable employment.
One of the other unintended effects of tariffs are the expensive for supplies and tools and how they are rising. The U.S. imports 70% of their farming machinery into the U.S. from countries with tariffs. And so this leads to the pricing of these machines that farmers need for their farms to survive being much higher of a price. So they have to spend more money on that and are making in total less of a profit.
So what has already been done to combat these tariffs? First off, aid programs, more specifically USDA's trade mitigation program, helps farmers offset their losses from these tariffs and overall stabilizes agricultural sectors. However, there are some important limitations. For example, they still face drops in revenue and don't get all the money they lose from tariffs. Smaller farms often get less help from these aid programs. And finally, it doesn't fix any supply chain problems. Another major solution is expanding to new markets. The pros to this solution is that it reduces dependency on one country and it creates more stable long-term buyers. The limitations to this is that it takes time to build relationships with new countries. It can be expensive for smaller farms to grasp these opportunities, and it doesn't fully replace the lost market from the traditional markets before the tariffs.
So what exactly is our solution to the problem?
One part of our solution is multifunctional agroecosystems, and that is when farmers use crops and species to make their own kind of ecosystem on their farm, and they help each other grow, and a lot of them have crabs and soybean farms, and it just helps control harmful species in the area and can also lead to a greater profit because they're selling multiple different products at the same time. And so far, 90 million acres in the US are doing this with their farms right now. And it is mostly in the western half of the US. So Massachusetts could do a much better job of using this to help make more profit in their farms.
Now on to the pros of multifunctional agroecosystems. Well, they allow for more ways to earn money as farmers can make money from several products such as soybeans and crabs, as Aaron stated earlier. And they also strengthen supply chains since many different products are being produced in one place. And this allows communities to pick their locally from buyers instead of looking internationally.
However, there are some important limitations. First off, it takes years to fully develop, so it's more of a long-term solution. It's very expensive upfront, which could be a problem for these smaller farms, and it doesn't immediately help farmers avoid these tariffs. Like I said, it's a long-term solution.
Now on to the second part of our solution, which is expanding state and federal financial support. The pros of this include things like emergency aid, wage support, and unemployment help, and these are all programs that help overcome income losses while also staying financially stable while tariffs are in place. And then most importantly, this is a short-term solution, so farmers would have immediate relief and then also have time to adjust to a longer-term solution like multifunctional agroecosystems, as we mentioned earlier.
The limitations to this solution is that it doesn't fix the tariffs at all. It doesn't avoid the tariffs, and it creates a dependency on these aid solutions. Lastly, it is costly for the government, so it's not viability. The viability isn't long term. It's more of a short term solution.
According to Joseph Glauber from the American Enterprise Institute, the Commodity Credit Corporation Charter Act has allowed and continues to allow for billions of dollars to go to struggling workers. The Emergency Commodity Assistance Program and the Marketing Assistance for Specialty Crops programs are just a couple of the programs that allow for these kinds of funds to go to workers affected by trade wars. Steps need to be taken to prevent the escalation of already existing trade wars as well. This can be in the form of the government implementing solutions such as multifunctional agroecosystems or aid programs, and it is important for the government to acknowledge the risks that come with using tariffs solely as a political device.
Thank you, and here's our works cited.
That was 8 minutes and 51 seconds. Okay, starting with Erin. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you decided to exclude from your team presentation, and why?
Thank you for your question. So Sarah's IRR was mostly on how oyster farms were affected by this, and there was many arguments of the exact way of farming them that is affected by tariffs and the different resources that are needed. But since our presentation was on agricultural jobs and just the Massachusetts in general and not just oyster farms, we decided to exclude a lot of information while still keeping some of the general effects of how tariffs can affect agricultural jobs.
All right, thank you very much. Sarah, Having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
Thank you for your question. I think a big gap in our team's research is that we lack local sources, and that means that we don't really have a lot on like academic journals. For example, we didn't have a lot of academic journals that address very local to Massachusetts situations, but we had to use what we did have that was a local source and use what we had on the entirety of the US and kind of apply it in that way. And I think that if we had been able to find more sources on that, I think our argument would have been strengthened.
Great, thank you very much. Ben, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that made you think differently about your team's solution or conclusion.
Chase was looking at expanding to new markets, and we looked at that, but it was an incredibly long-term solution, and then it was also incredibly costly. So that helped us decide to on multifunctional agro ecosystems, and then expanding federal and state financial support. So that helped us decide to choose those two, since one was a short term and one was a long term. So we knew we needed a short term and long term solution, since a long term wouldn't serve as much purpose without a short term.
All right, thank you very much. And excuse me, Chase, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Ben's findings.
Thank you for your question. So at first I was only examining how aid programs how tariffs affect the costs for farms, but I didn't realize how Ben's solution had the political perspective, and I didn't realize how the relationships between each countries that we were having were affected, and how customers wouldn't want to buy our products anymore. So that helped us realize our solution, that we needed a more internal solution of multifunctional agro ecosystems.
All right, thank you very much.